So I just want to give you an idea of the schedule, and then we'll have, excuse me, a panel or speakers come up and do a panel. So right now, I'd like to introduce Carol Kingman, but also we're lucky today. Is Sugar still here? Or did Sugar? Hi, Sugar. So Sugar Vogel is the executive director of the Southern Nevada Law Program. But speaking for them today is Carol Kingman. Come on up, Carol. She's a native of Arizona and has called Las Vegas home since 1987. She earned a bachelor's degree in education from BYU and continued her education at the University of Las Vegas, where she earned a master's degree in history and later a Juris Doctorate at the William S. Boyd School of Law. While in law school, she interned with the Clark County District Attorney's Office and upon graduation worked for a private law firm before joining the Senior Citizens Law Project as an elder law attorney in 2005, where she works primarily in the field of estate planning. She is licensed in the state of Nevada. She enjoys teaching as a former faculty member, taught American history at UNLV, one of my favorite subjects. Currently, she serves on the faculty at the College of Southern Nevada. We have one of your colleagues in the room, where she teaches law in the Paralegal Studies Division. She has also taught continuing education classes on elder law for local members of the bar. She has 3 grown children and 3 grandchildren, and traveling to see them is one of her favorite activities. She also enjoys traveling, reading, studying history, and attending March Madness. Right on. Thank you for being here, Carol, and I will start your, oh,
yes.
you have handouts.
Yes, I have handouts, so there should be plenty for everybody to just, if you can circulate
So if
those.
you can, stand here and talk, I'll have my helpers help us out.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to pose a question, first of all, and I'd like to ask if there's anybody in the room that feels that their life is absolutely predictable. Absolutely. There's no question that no nasty surprises, no accidents, no unfortunate setbacks. Is there anybody that can say, that's me? I personally don't know anybody that has the predictable life. So if you don't have a predictable life, you need one of these. So basically, this is for everyone. It's not just for people as we get older. Anybody over 18 should have this advanced directive for healthcare, which is my part of the program to kind of go through the document. You had a wonderful presentation just now about having access to it and having it available and having it so that it can be utilized, and the people that you need to have contacted can be put in the loop and brought up to speed on what's going on. This is the actual document. This is the document we use in our office, and I'm sure that you understand that as patients you have the right to control things. You have the right to speak up. You have the right to make decisions. And that's the ideal. We hope that you never need these documents. We hope that you're always able to manage your health care, to make decisions, to talk to your doctors, to understand your choices, and to speak and be able to exercise those choices. But as we know, sometimes things happen unexpectedly that make it so that we can't necessarily communicate effectively about what we want or what we don't want. And as we go through this document, I'm going to continually emphasize there's no wrong answers. There's no right or wrong. This is outlining your preferences and your beliefs and what you want to have happen in terms of controlling your environment. You have the right to consent to treatment, the right to not consent to treatment, or the right to discontinue treatment. There's a variety of options. And the good thing about this document is it does give you a little bit of ability to customize things, to talk about, contingencies and, well, this is what I want in this situation. So if you're looking at page 2, this durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions, this durable is an important word because basically that means it endures. As long as you are able to execute it, have legal capacity, and able to execute it and complete it, it isn't going to become voided should you lose capacity, should something happen that you're not able to exercise your own control. It endures, and that's what that word durable means when you see that. That's what that's talking about. A power of attorney is a sharing of your power. You're not losing your power, you're sharing it. You're making the circle bigger. You're giving somebody the authority to not only get information, but to speak for you and follow your wishes. And that really is their mandate. You're not giving them license to just freelance and make it up as they go along and do what they want. They are legally mandated to follow your wishes. So they just kind of become the voice in all of this if you're unable. This first page here talks about giving consent, refusing consent, withdrawing treatment, that type of thing. As I'm sure you've understood from some of the other speakers, it's always revocable. You're never stuck with this. It's always adjustable because things happen. Maybe you need to make changes. People come in and out of your life, or perhaps, unfortunately, you lose somebody and you got to rearrange things. It's not set in stone, so it's always adaptable and adjustable and amendable. It's revocable should you wish to do that. It's an important document, as I said, for everyone to have, because when someone becomes 18, they are legally an adult. They don't have that parental shield where the parents are going to automatically be able to speak for them. And I get a lot of questions in our role at the law program that, well, they'll do whatever my wife says, or my wife can speak for me, or my husband can speak for me, or my kids, they'll listen to my kids. Not necessarily. I think the times when a doctor functioned for an entire family and knew the entire family and knew the dynamics and knew the relationships, in those days, I think it could be a situation where people could speak for each other and they didn't require paper. They didn't require documents. But unfortunately, as we've evolved, we live in a litigious society, and people want paper. They don't want to get sued for making a misstep or doing something that perhaps you didn't want, because we're talking about very serious decisions, obviously, here. But the most important thing about this document is it has no effect if you can manage things yourself. Again, we hope you never need it. This doesn't have any power if you're able to manage things on your own. It is triggered by the need. It's triggered by the event that occurs. So if you look at page 4, this is where you're designating a healthcare agent. You're picking somebody. That first line is where your name would go. This is your document. Where it says name, address, and phone number, that's who you're picking. That's your number one go-to person. That is the first person you would want notified, or that you trust most in the world, or however you want to frame that. That's where their name and contact information goes. Now, unfortunately, the way this was all formatted, you can pick 2 other people, but it's further down the line in subsequent pages. So many times people think, well, wait a minute, I want to pick more than one person. You do have that opportunity, but this is your number one pick. And in choosing an agent, choosing somebody, we often turn to family. That's typical, that's logical, but you're not constrained by that. You can choose anybody that you feel you trust that is over the age of 18. They don't have to be a relative. They don't have to live here. Again, we live in an era of easy communication where people can be reached. That's why the phone number is so critical, much more important than the address. They're not going to write them a letter if you're in the hospital. They're going to call somebody. And I'm disheartened sometimes when people bring in existing documents that they've got, and they've got somebody's name, I designate so-and-so to speak for me, and then it moves on into the body of the document, and there's no contact information. It's almost useless without contact information. You've got to know who to call and how to find them. So keeping those phone numbers up to date is important, and the phone numbers are much more important really than the address part of it. In choosing somebody, again, as I said, we often turn to family, but I always tell my clients, don't pick the person that goes to pieces in a crisis, because that's not a good choice, no matter how much they love you. If they're just going to stand there and cry, they're not going to do you any good. You need somebody that can kind of gather themselves and handle a tough situation, or handle a tough decision, and you know the people in your life who are better suited to that and those who aren't. Again, it's not a matter of who do you love most or who loves you most. It's who are the copers, because this should be a list of people that cope, because it is not happy times usually when we need this. It can be very tough decisions. In creating this, you are stating that I understand what I'm doing. I understand this document, what it does. The general statement of authority granted there on page 5, up there, point number 3, you're basically giving them the same authority that you have, but you'll notice in the middle of that paragraph, great big letters, except. There are exceptions. There are exceptions that no matter how much you trust somebody, that by law they cannot be, they can't exercise those type of actions. And I should also mention too that under selecting somebody, getting back to page 4 for a minute, there's some people by law that you can't choose. You can't put your doctor down. You can't put your doctor's staff down. You can't put the administrator of a healthcare facility down or an employee, that type of thing. So there are some people that are precluded by law by virtue of the fact that it could pose a conflict of interest. But now getting back to the things that your agent cannot do, and my clients take great comfort as we run through this list. There are some things by law they cannot do. One of those is your agent cannot authorize a lobotomy for you. So isn't that good news? Aren't we glad? Who knows if they even do those anymore? But and electroshock treatment to the brain, the one flew over the cuckoo's nest stuff. They can't do that. No abortion, no sterilization, and most importantly, they cannot have you declared crazy by way of this document. That doesn't mean that you might not at some point be found a little bit off, but nonetheless, they can't do it with this document. So those are the limitations, and we give you lines at the bottom of that where you can actually add additional limitations. Many people do not, so I don't want people to feel pressured that they gotta come up with something to put down. It usually follows religious beliefs. If there's something medically that's attuned to your religious belief system, such as not wanting a blood transfusion, something like that, this would be the appropriate place to note that and to mention that. So that space is provided. And if you don't want to add anything, I always encourage people to write in none, N-O-N-E, just to indicate that they did not add anything. So looking at page 6, duration, we make it so it doesn't expire. Otherwise, you just have to keep doing it over and over again. Doesn't make sense. So unless you specify otherwise, it's going to be of an indefinite nature in terms of it's not going to expire. And then under these statements of desires, this is where you start kind of customizing it, saying, well, do this and don't do that, and I want this, but I don't want that. And the form that we often use, we don't always use these booklets unless we go out into an outreach situation. The form that we typically use has these lines at the end of these boxes where you're going to agree or disagree, but it doesn't matter. The point is you have the option to clarify things, to state specific concerns that you might have. Some people say, I'm okay with hospice. Some say, I definitely don't want chemotherapy, or I'm okay with hospice. Things like that can go in these lines, but again, it's not required that you fill in those blanks. So if we look at these boxes, the first 4 pretty much deal with end-of-life decisions. Pretty serious situations where people are on life support. They are hooked up to machines that are making the body functions work, with the notion that if you disconnected those, you probably would not survive. And again, there's no right or wrong here. It's a reflection of your personal wishes. And we've got 2 boxes there to agree or disagree. And we always want people to initial because we want to indicate that it's you and not just a check mark that anybody could have made. This first one has to do with being in a vegetative state, being brain dead, no brain activity, you were hooked up to life support for, you know, that situation, and you're saying basically with box A, don't ever disconnect. Don't give up. You know, I believe in miracles. Don't ever disconnect anything. And it says not, you know, without regard for cost or the chances of recovery or anything like that. This is what some people feel strongly about, and they're going to indicate basically, keep me going. Don't disconnect anything. Now, B is the complete opposite of that. So A and B can't match. Sometimes people struggle with this. You can't agree on both of them, and you can't disagree on both of them because they contradict each other. So if A is keep me going, B is saying if I'm in a coma, and I often get the question, well, what if it's a, you know, medically induced coma or something like that where they're trying to make me well? No. We're talking about brain dead, no brain activity type of coma. And the doctors have reasonably concluded is irreversible. I desire that life-sustaining and prolonged treatments not be used. So this is basically let me go. Let me go. So it's the opposite of keep me going. It's let me go. And you'll notice there's no timetable here. It's not saying, okay, after X amount of weeks, let me go. What you're doing with this document is you're saying either keep me going or let me go. And if you're saying let me go, you're putting that timetable in the hands of your agent. Hopefully you've chosen someone near and dear that knows you well, that can say, well, Mom wouldn't want us to be hasty, or Mom wouldn't want to hang around, or this is not what she'd want, or this is not what he would want. You're putting the timetable pretty much in the hands of the agent that you've chosen, the person that you've chosen. And they're authorized to get information from the doctors. So they are in the loop as to what's going on, what's your condition, what are the chances of survival, what kind of progress are you making, what's the current status. That's part of what this document does. It gives them access to information so they can make these very serious life and death decisions. So there's no timetable there. That's something you want to maybe have that private discussion with, that heart-to-heart with the people that you've chosen. And I will tell you right now, kids hate to talk about this. You sit down with your kids and try to talk about this and go, oh, you know, no, we don't want to talk about it. You know, just put the papers away. We know we got them. But you really do need to, you know, drive that discussion because they do need more than just the bare bones of a document. They do need to have that heart-to-heart discussion so that they can act with some measure of confidence, hopefully, that they are following your wishes and following through on what you want. So you might meet resistance as you discuss this with family members. Understand that you're not alone. That's pretty typical. C is kind of another version of let me go. Whereas B said if I'm in a coma, C says if I have an incurable or terminal condition or illness and no reasonable hope of long-term recovery or survival, it's kind of like your end stage something. B was a coma. C is you are on life support by virtue of some disease, some condition, end stage liver failure, end stage something, to the point that you are on life support because of that disease or condition. And this would be probably where that the POLST would come into, where you dialogue with your doctors, you dialogue with your physicians, and you're talking about you know, the serious road ahead, so to speak, and making sure that they understand what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. Because this is a little bit different than the coma one, because you might be able to speak to some extent. But if you are on life support and there's things like ventilators in place, obviously dialogue and talking and conversation is not going to be happening. So that's why this document, again, becomes important, and that's why advanced discussions with people become very important. D has to do with a feeding tube. sometimes after an accident or after a surgery, people might temporarily have a feeding tube. Nobody's going to pull out feeding tubes that are temporary or that are making you well or that are making progress. But if you are on life support with ventilators and such, you can't chew and swallow normally. So the feeding tube becomes part and parcel of that life support system. And I think they give it its own box because we're emotional about food and we don't want to think about being hungry, and we don't know if we're hungry in that situation. But this is a hard box for people. This is maybe the hardest box because they throw the word starvation in there, which freaks everybody out. Nobody wants to starve to death. You know, some of the wording in these passages is kind of tortured and kind of hard to understand. That's why we walk our clients through very carefully every box, every provision in here. But what this is saying is leave the feeding tube in. Even if you disconnect the other stuff, leave the feeding tube in. So if that was your attitude, then you would agree on that box. If you want everything taken out, all the life support, including the feeding tube, then you would indicate disagree, because that's basically saying take everything out. Now, those first four pretty much end-of-life decisions, as I said. E becomes a really important one because it's not necessarily end of life. And this, I think, is the hardest box of the whole group to understand, and yet I think it's perhaps the most important of the bunch. It starts out very negatively. It says, I do not desire treatment. But then it goes on to talk about burdens and benefits and balancing those. So giving the agent the ability to always say, well, is it worth it? Will we get enough gain if we do this? Or is it just putting them through too much for too little gain? Like, well, we can give them an operation and maybe they'll live a couple more days, and a lot of people say not worth it. But let's put it in the scenario of you're in a car accident and you're not going to die, but you're not able to give consent for treatment. You're not able to say, yeah, do the operation, fix me, put me back together, whatever they're proposing. And you need that spokesperson to be able to speak up and say, yes, I'm authorizing the surgery. I'm authorizing that we do this course of action. Because remember, you're not able. Ideally, you're able to say, yes, let's do this. But if you can't, this gives your agent the ability to consent to treatments to try to put you back on the road to health. Now, it does talk about my agent is to consider the relief of suffering, the preservation or restoration of functioning, meaning, again, is it worth it? Are we going to get some gain here? And the quality as well as the extent of possible extension of my life. That's a lot of stuff for a person to consider. So again, it reinforces the idea that you want to have a discussion with the people that you're choosing and go through some of these options and make sure that they are clear about what your attitudes and your feelings are about things. The last one, box F there at the bottom of page 7, is saying, I direct my attending physician to mercifully administer such medication to me as will alleviate any suffering. And what we're talking about here is heavy-duty narcotic type drugs, you know, morphine pumps and things like that. And maybe you've known people that are in horrible pain at the end of their lives. And the goal is to keep them comfortable. It's kind of the hospice philosophy of we're not trying to extend your life. We're not trying to experiment on you or cure you. We're trying to keep you comfortable. It's palliative care. And we jokingly refer to this box as the give me drugs box. Give me drugs. And it's funny, some people ponder and angst over so many of these other boxes. Most people are real quick to agree on this one. This is the most popular box, I would say. But then there are, you know, again, there's no right or wrong answer. And there is that attitude like, no, I don't want to be doped up. I want to be somewhat clear-headed. And again, I don't tell people what to pick, but when you're sitting around a table feeling good, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I want to be clear-headed. It might be altogether different when you're, you know, struggling with some significant pain. You know your own tolerance for pain. You know your own attitudes and abilities to cope with those kind of things. So again, each of these need thoughtful consideration as you mark them down. Now moving on to page 8. Designation of an alternate agent. This is where you're picking your backups. And I would say at least a second choice is a good idea, especially if for your first choice, spouses are picking each other. And that's usually the way it is. Spouses usually will choose each other, but spouses ride around in cars together. There's always that chance of a common accident that could knock both of you out of commission. So I encourage people to choose somebody as a backup that doesn't live at their house, or at least isn't always with them. Don't pick somebody just to fill in the blanks, though. This is the same kind of criteria as we had with our first pick. You're putting your life ostensibly in their hands in terms of decision making. You want somebody that you can count on, somebody you trust, somebody that has a track record of reliability and stability in your life. That is who you are choosing. And again, addresses are good as identifiers, but they're not the critical thing. The phone numbers, it loses so much value if you don't have contact phone numbers in there. So we'll put as many phone numbers as you wish. We'll put cell phones and house phones and work phones and, you know, spouses' phones. We'll put everybody's phone in there, however many you want to add, just to give the maximum access to that. Third choice becomes probably less important than a second choice, but in the situation where sometimes, you know, people put their spouse and they have 2 kids and they put the 2 kids. And functionally what really happens, I think most of the time in a family crisis over someone's health, the family gathers and it's a group decision as to how you're going to proceed or what you're going to do, but you're designating kind of a pecking order of spokespeople. You're designating who's the doctor going to look to be the voice of decision in terms of, yes, we have as a family decided we're going to do this or not do that. So as I said, second choice I encourage if you feel comfortable putting a second choice. Third choice, not nearly so important. If you're going to leave these spaces blank, again, write none in there, N-O-N-E. We don't want the busybody relative writing their name down. We don't want someone you don't know or don't like writing their name down. So write N-O-N-E, and I'm not trying to insult you by spelling it, but I had a client write N-U-N one day, and I'm not telling you to pick a none unless you want to. That's not what I'm asking, but indicate that you didn't make the choice. Indicate that you did not select somebody so that it is clear what your wishes are with that. Moving on to page 9, prior designations revoked. Newest one counts. So you could do as many of these as you needed to do if you felt like, you know, the landscape was shifting and you had to rearrange people or whatever. The newest one counts. And what we encourage our clients to do is once you've executed a new one, get rid of the old ones so that there's not confusion and in a panic and in a hurry somebody picks up the wrong one. Or if they're not in the lockbox and they're not going to be getting that most recent document. So make sure that the newest one is the one that is going to be accessed. Waiver of conflict of interest. This is always an interesting one because the people that you're picking, again, you're probably reaching out and choosing family members. The people you're picking probably show up in the will. So inherently, there's a conflict. You've given them the ability to end your life and take your stuff. And most people say, I don't care. These are still the people I trust. These are still the people I count on. But this, you are waiving the fact, you're acknowledging the fact that, yes, there's somewhat of a conflict of interest because by making the decision to end life support, they may stand to inherit something. That's what that passage addresses. The number 10, challenges. This is a really important box because what you're doing is you are choosing someone to be your advocate in the medical system. You are choosing someone to be your buffer between you and the medical system. They are going to be empowered to get information, to stick up for you, to ask questions, to be your defender, however you want to style that or think of that. By choosing them, you have legally given them the power to access to information and access to status and possibilities for recovery and this type of thing. So that is a very important provision. This nomination of guardian, this isn't, don't confuse this with what you can do with the lockbox. There's nothing official about this, but it's just kind of a statement. It's just kind of an endorsement saying, if I needed a guardian, these are the people that I trust, if they're willing to be my guardian. It doesn't force anybody to be your guardian, and it doesn't automatically make anybody your guardian. It's just saying, and usually people pick the same people, or on some of our forms we'll write my agents in order named, meaning the same people that I put in the document. That's who I'm saying, if they're willing to be my guardian and I was deemed to be in need of a guardian, I'm okay with these people. So again, this doesn't have the officialness that the one with the lockbox does, but it's an expression of endorsement, so to speak. This release of information, this is HIPAA. This is what allows the doctors to speak with the people that you've named. You know that HIPAA is restrictive on who the doctors can share information with. There's heavy penalties for violating your confidentiality. That's what this is about. It waives it for the people you've picked. It doesn't waive it in general. It's waiving it for those that you selected in this document. And gives them the if they're going to make life and death decisions, they need information. Now, it does need to be notarized. There is a provision in the statutes that allows for witnesses. In our office, we prefer to go the notarization route. That's why we don't have a witness block here in your document. The notary, I think, gives it a little bit more formality, a little bit more officialness. So you can't fill this out and sign it and have it be valid without signing it in front of a notary. And in our office, we have the notaries there. So when they're executed with our office, then we get it all accomplished in one stop like that. The directive to physician is an interesting one. I'm not necessarily as big a fan of the directive to physician because I think of the durable power of attorney, the one I've just gone through. I think of that as a two-way street. You can say, keep me going, let me go. Keep me going, let me go. You know, you've got some options, you can customize it, and most importantly, you're naming people. The directive to physician, I see it's more of a one-way street. It's saying to the doctor, it's a direct open letter to your doctor saying, let me go. So there's no buffer of somebody that knows you interposed between you and the medical system. And I think that's why I prefer the durable power of attorney for healthcare. Now, the directive to physician, sometimes people don't have anyone. That's just the sadness of some situations. They don't have someone they feel they can count on. They don't have someone that they feel that they can rely on for these kind of decisions, but they want to express what they want or what they don't want. So if they are of the mind that they do not want to be left on life support in perpetuity or for an extended period of time, they can do this document. It doesn't require a notarization. It does require a signature in front of two witnesses. My problem with doing both of these is that I'm always worried that in haste and in panic and in worry that people are scrambling around for documents if they don't have copies, which ideally you've supplied to them because you picked them. But if they don't have documents, they find the directive to physician first and they don't look further. And as I said, the durable power of attorney for healthcare decisions, I think, is a much more valuable, useful document. But nonetheless, we do have it here available if that is the appropriate decision-making document for people. And then we have included a registration agreement for the lockbox here. We promote that a great deal. We encourage it. We help them fill it out. We explain how it operates, and just as an added endorsement of the fact that it's in the hospital systems for Nevada, but you know what? We have had clients it has worked for outside of Nevada. We had a gentleman that he was traveling in California, didn't have his document with him, but he had his card. He had his card in his wallet, and the hospital called the lockbox in Nevada or contacted the lockbox, and they faxed a copy of his advance directive. So it functioned outside the boundaries of Nevada because he had his card with him. But that being said, I want to spend a minute talking about access, because access is critical. Don't hide the ball with this document. I mean, your will and maybe deeds and powers of attorney, some of those things are of a much more private nature. And those are the things that maybe you want to put in the safe or the safe deposit box or someplace under lock and key. Those are the private things. Do not hide the ball with this. Access is what this is all about. And there's nothing that compromises your identity in this document. You don't have to be worried about what would happen if somebody that you didn't want to have it gets it. Access is important. Travel with it. Take it with you when you get on the plane. Some people keep it in the glove box of the car. I have clients that live all by themselves and they put it on the refrigerator. Emergency people come in, there it is. You can take I've had clients take a screenshot of each page, and there it is in their phone. They've got it that way. And then, of course, we encourage the lockbox. So there's that added layer of access. Give a copy to the people that you've named. You've given them a job to do. Don't keep them in the dark. They have a job to do. So a copy to them. Your doctors are always happy to have a copy parked in the file. Always a good idea. If you know you're going to the hospital, you know there's something scheduled, somewhat routine, maybe you're going for a procedure, you know you're going for something scheduled, take it with you, because they'll bug you to do a new one. If they will, and they'll just hand it to you and say fill it out without any real guidance as to what the provisions mean. And as we've seen, some of the wording is kind of tough to untangle. So if you have it, take it with you when you know you're going to be going into a medical situation for a procedure or an operation. But access, I can't emphasize that enough. Do not hide the ball. And when you do register it with the lockbox, not only do you get that card, it's really cool. It's a little peel-off thing at the bottom, and you fold it and it becomes a card. But there's also, a lot of people don't realize is there's little tiny stickers at the top that you can peel off and stick on your ID. So if you were in an emergency situation and couldn't say, call my daughter, call my husband, call my friend, whomever you've named, they realize, emergency people realize at that point you're in the system, and they can, it kind of speeds the process along in terms of notifications. So access is something that we emphasize a great deal. Now, this is a piece of what we consider estate planning. What we do in our office, one document doesn't do it all, usually. Obviously, we're focusing on healthcare here today and healthcare decisions, so that's what this document is for. But it's a piece of a collection of documents usually. So when you come to our office and you come to a seminar, we educate you on the basic collection that most people end up needing. And we actually in our seminars do complete this document for people that wish to leave with one piece of the puzzle done. We have the notaries, we get it done, we make you copies, and you leave with a completed document. And she gave me the 2-minute signal, so open to questions? Okay? Okay. I bored you that badly. Oh, dear. But no, we'll be back for questions, so that'll be awesome. All right. Thank you. Thank you.